He thought prison was already the worst place a man could end up. But nothing could prepare him for what he discovered behind those cold steel bars. His cellmate, the man he shared every hour of every day with, was hiding a secret that cut deeper than betrayal, a secret that pushed him past the breaking point. And when the truth came out, the cell walls turned into a crime scene that would haunt investigators for years. Welcome back to Dark Motives, where we dive deep into the cases that leave people shaken long after the headlines fade. Today's story takes us inside prison walls, where jealousy, betrayal, and rage collided in the most brutal way. An inmate discovered that the one person he thought he could trust had been carrying on a secret relationship with his wife. What happened next would turn a locked cell into a chamber of horror. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss a single case. These stories take you inside the darkest motives of the human mind, and every week, we bring you new cases that will keep you at the edge of your seat. And as you watch, I want you to drop a comment telling us where you are watching from. Your thoughts and perspectives are what keep this community alive, so don't be shy. Now let's step into the prison where this deadly story began. Our story takes us to Huntsville, Texas, home to one of the oldest and most notorious prison complexes in the United States. Behind the razor wire and concrete walls lived two men who could not have been more different, yet fate placed them in the same cramped cell. The first was Marcus Hill, a 32-year-old serving a 10-year sentence for armed robbery. Marcus was known as quiet, disciplined, and fiercely protective of his family on the outside. He spoke often about his wife, telling anyone who would listen that she was the only reason he had the strength to keep going. In his mind, surviving prison meant one day returning home to her and starting over. His cellmate was Anthony Brooks, a 35-year-old with a reputation for being smooth-talking and manipulative. Anthony was no stranger to prison life, having served multiple sentences for fraud and drug charges. He carried himself with charm, always finding a way to win people over, including guards who often described him as easygoing and respectful. But beneath that charm was a man who thrived on secrets. The two men lived shoulder to shoulder, eating, sleeping, and enduring the grind of incarceration together. To Marcus, Anthony seemed harmless, even trustworthy. What he did not know was that Anthony had managed to build a dangerous connection to the one person Marcus loved most, his wife. And it was only a matter of time before that truth tore everything apart. Marcus's wife, Latoya, lived just 2 hours away in Houston, Texas. She was a devoted mother of one, trying to hold her small family together while her husband served his sentence. For the first year, she visited Marcus faithfully, standing in line with other wives and mothers, waiting for her turn to sit across the glass and talk about life outside. Marcus lived for those visits. They reminded him that he wasn't forgotten, that there was still a life worth fighting for. But as time dragged on, prison has a way of testing loyalty. Bills piled up, loneliness crept in, and the weight of raising a child alone pressed heavily on Latoya's shoulders. And in those cracks of vulnerability, Anthony Brooks found his way. He wasn't just Marcus's cellmate, he was also clever enough to gain access to Marcus's world. Through stolen phone calls, hidden notes, and moments Marcus never noticed, Anthony began to communicate with Latoya. What started as casual conversations turned into something darker. Anthony knew the right words, the right tone, the right way to comfort a woman who felt abandoned. He painted himself as someone who understood her struggles in a way Marcus never could while locked behind bars. Slowly, her visits to see Marcus grew less frequent, her letters shorter, her phone calls colder. Marcus thought it was stress. He never imagined the betrayal happening right under his nose. The most dangerous part was that Latoya wasn't the one who initiated it. Anthony was deliberate. He manipulated, tested boundaries, and before long he had convinced her that she deserved more than waiting years for a man behind bars. Their conversations slipped from emotional support to something intimate. By the time Marcus began to notice the changes in his wife's behavior, the secret bond between his cellmate and his wife had already taken root. And in prison, where rumors spread like wildfire, secrets never stay buried for long. One careless slip, one overheard comment, and suddenly, Marcus began to piece together the unthinkable. The man he trusted in his cell, the man who ate meals beside him and shared the same walls, was secretly involved with his wife. For Marcus, betrayal didn't just come from the outside. It was sleeping less than 3 feet away from him. Marcus first heard whispers during yard time. Another inmate joked that Anthony always seemed to have someone waiting by the phones, someone with a soft, familiar voice. At first, Marcus brushed it off. Prison gossip was constant, and men thrived on stirring trouble. But when he noticed Anthony guarding his phone time more fiercely than ever, Marcus's stomach began to knot. Something wasn't right. One evening, while Anthony was in the shower, Marcus decided to check his cellmate's stash. Every prisoner had a hiding spot, and Anthony's wasn't hard to find. Beneath a loose corner of his mattress, Marcus uncovered folded scraps of paper, covered in handwriting he instantly recognized. It was Latoya's. The letters carried words that should have been written only to him, words of comfort, affection, even longing. But they weren't addressed to her husband. They were addressed to Anthony. The realization hit him like a hammer to the chest. His wife, the woman he clung to for survival, had been sharing her heart with the man who slept 6 feet away. Betrayal burned in every vein, a humiliation too heavy to swallow. Marcus could feel his hands shaking as he stuffed the letters back into hiding. He knew the next time he looked Anthony in the eye, he would not see a cellmate. He would see the man who stole his wife. That night, Marcus confronted him. The cell filled with tension as Marcus demanded answers, his voice breaking under rage and heartbreak. Anthony, calm as ever, didn't deny it. Instead, he smirked. He told Marcus that Latoya deserved better, that she needed someone who was free in spirit, not chained to bars and bad decisions. Every word drove the knife deeper. For Marcus, that was the breaking point. The prison walls around him seemed to close in tighter, and the betrayal he felt left no room for reason. What began as words turned into shoves, shoves into fists, and fists into something much darker. The confrontation had crossed a line that neither man could ever step back from. After that confrontation, the cell was never the same. Marcus stopped speaking to Anthony, but silence inside a prison cell is more dangerous than shouting. Every night Marcus lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the betrayal over and over in his head. The letters, the smirk, the audacity of the man who dared to touch his world outside. Rage was becoming his only companion. Anthony, on the other hand, carried himself with arrogance. He didn't try to hide his connection with Latoya anymore. He would make sly remarks, slipping her name into casual conversations, letting Marcus know she was still in touch. Sometimes he would hum softly while reading her letters, a cruel reminder that Marcus was powerless behind bars. It wasn't just betrayal now, it was humiliation, and in prison humiliation can be deadly. Other inmates began to notice. They could sense the tension whenever the two shared the same space. Some warned Marcus to let it go, that no woman was worth adding years to his sentence. But Marcus wasn't listening. Every word, every glance, every reminder from Anthony felt like gasoline on an open flame. The anger built with no outlet, and the walls of the cell became a pressure cooker. Marcus's mind began to change. He stopped thinking about freedom, about the day he would walk out to his wife and child. Instead, his thoughts grew darker. Justice in his eyes could no longer come from waiting. It had to come from action. And that action would be taken inside the very cell they shared. For Marcus, the decision was no longer if it would happen, but when. The betrayal had crossed a line that could not be undone, and every breath Anthony took in that cell was a reminder that Marcus was already living in hell. A storm was brewing, and soon the walls of Huntsville would echo with violence no one could stop. It was a humid summer night inside Huntsville, the kind where the air felt thick, where sweat clung to every surface, and tempers always ran short. Lights had gone out, the tier was quiet, and most inmates tried to escape into restless sleep. But Marcus lay awake, his heart pounding, his mind clouded by rage and betrayal. Anthony was on the top bunk, flipping through one of LaToya's letters with a smug grin before finally drifting off to sleep. That was the final insult, the proof that Anthony felt untouchable even in the same room as the man he had betrayed. To Marcus, it wasn't just arrogance, it was mockery. Marcus sat up slowly, his body tense, his breathing sharp. He had spent days imagining this moment, and now it was here. He reached for the one weapon prison life had taught him to make, a sharpened piece of metal hidden carefully inside his belongings. Inmates called it a shank, but to Marcus, it was retribution. The sound of Anthony's steady breathing filled the cell. For Marcus, each breath was a reminder of betrayal, each rise and fall of his chest a slap to the face. He stood beneath the bunk, staring up at the man who had stolen his wife's loyalty, the man who had turned his prison sentence into a personal nightmare. And then, in one violent blur, Marcus struck. The attack was fast, fueled by rage, and completely silent at first. Anthony jolted awake, confusion flashing across his face before panic set in. The struggle was brutal, two men locked in a fight where survival meant everything. Marcus's rage outweighed Anthony's strength, and the cell became a scene of chaos hidden in the shadows of the night. When it was over, silence returned. But this time it was permanent. Anthony lay still, his arrogance and charm extinguished in an instant. Marcus sat in the corner of the cell, trembling, staring at what he had done. The act was final, irreversible, and within moments the entire prison would know that betrayal had turned into bloodshed. The silence inside that cell didn't last long. The next morning, when guards made their routine rounds, they noticed something was wrong. Anthony wasn't moving, and Marcus sat in the corner with a blank expression, as if the fight had drained every ounce of life from him. The alarm sounded echoing through the concrete halls, and within minutes officers flooded the tier. The scene they discovered was shocking, even by prison standards. Anthony's lifeless body bore the marks of a violent struggle, the kind of brutality that only comes from rage. Marcus didn't resist when they ordered him to the ground. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He simply lowered his head and placed his hands behind his back. It was as if the moment he had been building toward had finally passed, and now there was nothing left inside him. Word of the murder spread quickly through the prison population. Inmates whispered about it in the chow hall on the yard, and in every corner where stories could be traded. Some said Marcus was justified. That betrayal like that left no man with a choice. Others claimed Anthony had been reckless, playing with fire in a place where loyalty was everything. Regardless of opinion, one truth stood clear: prison walls might contain men, but they cannot contain emotions like rage and jealousy. The guards, hardened by years of dealing with violence, were still shaken. They had noticed tension between the two but never imagined it would end like this. Paperwork, reports, and investigations began immediately. Every step was documented, every detail photographed, because a murder inside prison wasn't just another crime. It was a stain on the system, a reminder of how fragile control could be. For Marcus, the walk out of the cell was eerily calm. Shackled and surrounded, he didn't fight. In his mind, the damage was already done. The betrayal had been answered, but at a cost he could never escape. From this moment on, Marcus Hill was no longer just another inmate serving time. He was a convicted murderer inside a place where even murder already lived. The investigation began immediately. Detectives from outside the prison were called in to ensure nothing was overlooked. They interviewed inmates, guards, and staff, piecing together the timeline of events that led to Anthony's death. Rumors of the affair with LaToya surfaced quickly, and while many dismissed it as gossip, the discovery of letters hidden in Anthony's belongings gave the whispers undeniable weight. To investigators, this wasn't just another prison killing. It was a crime born out of betrayal and passion. Marcus was placed in solitary confinement while the investigation unfolded. Behind those steel doors, he spoke very little, but when questioned by detectives, he didn't deny what he had done. He told them about the letters, about the humiliation, about the betrayal he could no longer carry. His voice remained calm, almost detached, as if confessing brought him a strange kind of relief. For the investigators, it was clear. Marcus had acted with intent. The question was how the court would handle a murder that happened inside prison walls. When Marcus finally appeared in court, the atmosphere was heavy. The prosecution painted him as a violent man who allowed jealousy to turn him into a killer. They argued that no matter the betrayal, no human life should be taken. But the defense presented a different angle. They described a man pushed past his breaking point, a man who had already lost his freedom and then lost the one thing he clung to most, his wife's loyalty. They called it a crime of passion, born from unbearable pain rather than cold-blooded planning. The trial was short, but the outcome was decisive. Marcus was found guilty of murder and sentenced to additional years on top of his original sentence. For him, the chance of walking free to reunite with his family disappeared forever. The courtroom buzzed with discussion, some feeling justice had been served, others wondering if betrayal had driven Marcus into a corner no man could have endured. Either way, his fate was sealed, and the walls of Huntsville would remain his world for life. The news of the murder spread beyond the prison walls and into the streets of Huntsville and Houston. Reporters covered the story as yet another tragic reminder of how prison life often breeds violence. But for the families involved, it was more than a headline. LaToya was forced to face the truth that her choices had played a role in setting events into motion. Some sympathized with her loneliness, but others condemned her for crossing a line that ended in bloodshed. Among inmates, Marcus's actions became a cautionary tale. Some saw him as a man who stood up for his pride, someone who refused to live with humiliation. Others saw a man who let his emotions rule him, destroying any chance of freedom he had left. In the harsh world of prison, both perspectives carried weight, and the story of Marcus and Anthony became one that men whispered about for years to come. For the public, the case stirred uncomfortable questions. How much loyalty can truly survive behind bars? How far will betrayal push a person before reason disappears? And is prison a place of rehabilitation, or just a breeding ground for violence and broken lives? Every opinion carried a different truth, but all agreed the story was haunting. As the years passed, the case became a dark memory of what happens when love, jealousy, and confinement collide. For Marcus, the story never faded. Every day behind bars was a reminder of the night he let rage consume him, and every headline that carried his name was a reminder to the outside world of a tragedy that began not with violence, but with betrayal. The story of Marcus Hill and Anthony Brooks is more than a prison killing. It is a reminder that betrayal can cut deeper than any weapon, and that choices made in moments of weakness can spiral into irreversible tragedy. Behind those walls, one man's rage collided with another man's arrogance, and the result was a crime that left scars far beyond the cell where it happened. But now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe Marcus was a man pushed past his breaking point? Or do you believe nothing justifies taking another life no matter the betrayal? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's see how different perspectives shape this case. And while you are there, tell us where you are watching from. We have people tuning in from all over the world, and your voice matters in this community. Sharing your thoughts not only keeps the conversation alive, but it also reminds us that these stories touch more lives than we imagine. If you found this case gripping, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Here on Dark Motives, we bring you the stories that reveal just how far human emotions can drive us, from jealousy to desperation to rage. New cases drop every week, and I promise you will not want to miss what's coming next. Until then, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, the darkest motives often hide in plain sight.